Leadership at UWC ISAK Japan. Hello everyone. In this presentation, I'd like to share with you about leadership, which is something that we hope every member at UWC ISAK Japan practices day in and day out. Whether you're discovering about UWC ISAK Japan's idea of leadership for the first time or getting more acquainted with the idea, it's likely that you already have an idea of what leadership is or should be from where you were before. As you watch the presentation, it's possible that some ideas may resonate with you and other ideas feel foreign to you. I'd like to invite you to notice the ideas that resonate, but more importantly, be open to the ones that seem foreign or new. Ultimately, I hope that our community can come together around shared ideas of leadership to bring them alive within our community. First thing first, since this presentation will be pretty long, if you don't have one yet, please get yourself a nice cup of tea or coffee and find yourself somewhere comfortable to sit at. And when you're done with that, let's get started. Let's begin by reminding ourselves of our school's mission. UWC ISAK Japan is part of the UWC network with a shared mission. UWC makes education a force to unite people, nations, and cultures for peace and a sustainable future. The distinct identity of UWC ISAK Japan is that we empower each other to be transformational leaders who explore new frontiers and make a positive impact today and in the future. Our motto is One Life, Realize Your Potential, Be a Catalyst for Positive Change. So, who do you think of when you think of a leader? You might come up with names like maybe Nelson Mandela, Mark Zuckerberg, or Malala Yousafzai. So what do these individuals have in common? Perhaps that their work has impacted the masses, but besides the scale of impact, oftentimes a leader is associated with someone holding a particular title or position in a community, like a CEO or a president of a country, or exemplifying certain characteristics that are innate, like charisma. At our school, we clearly state that leadership is not about a title, a position, or something that we are born with. Rather, leadership is practice. Instead of the idea that leadership can only be attained by a selected few, leadership is something that we can all grow within us. So it's not limited just to Nelson Mandela or Mark Zuckerberg, and we can all grow it with practice. This is a very important point, and we will come back to this point later in the presentation. So earlier we shared that leadership is a practice. What is it a practice of exactly? Leadership is the practice of creating positive change by identifying what's important and needed, taking purposeful action in the face of discomfort, using diversity as a strength, and supporting others in this practice. And the scale at which we practice leadership can range from self, community, to the global world. And what I want to emphasize here is that you don't need to change the world for it to be leadership. Change can be made at a much smaller scale, like within your advisory, your family, or even within you. This is still leadership. But ultimately, we wish for your impact to go beyond yourself, whatever scale it might be. Let's take a look at what the various parts of the leadership practice are about, starting with identifying what's important and what's needed, and taking purposeful action in the face of discomfort. So let's think back to your life and ask yourself if you have felt stressed, frustrated, disappointed, scared, sad, nervous, angry, or uncomfortable. Unless you are a superhuman, which none of us is, we have felt these feelings at some point in our lives. Now, search through your recent memory and reflect a time when you felt one of these emotions strongly. Ask yourself, what happened in terms of the situation and who was involved? What thoughts and emotions did you experience? And how did you react to the situation? Please pause the video at this point and take a minute or two to respond to these questions. Did how you react connect with you at your best? Or was it more unintentional and reactionary? So let me share with you what's happening in our brain when we are experiencing heightened sense of discomfort. There is a part of our brain called the survival part of the brain that's highly activated. It's where the limbic system is located, containing the amygdala that is responsible for fight, flight, or freeze response and has a role in processing emotions during survival, arousal, and autonomic response, and designed to keep us safe. This part was largely activated in our ancestors for survival when fighting or running away from their predators. Now, since its role is to keep us safe, the survival part of the brain, when activated, focuses on problems, obstacles, and limitations, and we find ourselves having narratives like, I can't, or I have to, or I should or I shouldn't. And what's funny is that in modern days, our survival brain can turn on even for stimuli that's not life or death, like an angry email, or losing keys, or being stood up. It's during these times, though, that we forget to be purposeful with our response and react in ways that are not helpful, like by arguing, or blaming, or complaining, or being defensive. So, when we are experiencing a great level of discomfort and our survival brain is highly activated, we tend to behave in a form of reaction rather than a purposeful response. For example, when you receive an insult from a colleague, then your autopilot reaction may be to snap back at that person. And when you experience something that arouses a sad feeling within you, your automatic reaction may be to ruminate and think of all the other things that are not going well in your life, making yourself even sadder than before. Neither of these behaviors that come as a reaction to experiences of discomfort is useful and can cause problems, but may come out unintentionally in a survival state. Now, there's another part of the brain called the growth part of the brain located in the prefrontal cortex. This is a rather recent development of the human brain, developed in the last few million years, and is able to process information that comes from the limbic system and engage in meaningful decision making, regulate attention, and moderate behavior. When this growth part of the brain is activated, we see opportunities, possibilities, and focus on connections, and have narratives such as I choose to, I wonder, or I could try. This is a part of the brain that someone like Malala would be using a lot. However, when we are faced with difficult circumstances, oftentimes the survival brain can take over, and it's difficult to engage with the growth part of the brain that allows us to respond optimistically and purposefully. As humans, however, we can train our mind to connect to growth mindset even when our survival brain is activated. In challenging circumstances, it's important to connect to opportunities rather than completely being stuck with the problems so that we can respond to them purposefully. So, how might we increase the chance of connecting to the growth part of the brain and making our responses more intentional when we're experiencing discomfort? By increasing awareness. So, what is this awareness business? Awareness is like creating a pause between a situation, like getting an angry email, getting a stomachache, or getting lost in the middle of Tokyo, and your reaction to the situation. And in the pause between the situation and your reaction, what do? You ask yourself questions such as, what's going on? What do I feel? What am I about to do? And what is important and needed? So, for instance, if you receive an insult from a friend, then before reacting to it, you pause and ask yourself, what's going on? I'm getting angry. What do I feel? I feel tension in my chest. What am I about to do? I want to hurt the other person. What's important and needed? I wish to respond calmly and I need time to cool down. So, with this pause, you can actually create choices in your response, including shouting back, saying an insult back to the person, or walking away. While your automatic reaction may be to shout back, with this pause, the reaction can turn into a response that is a conscious choice based on what's important and needed. So, based on our response to the questions that we asked, perhaps the conscious response may become walking away instead of shouting back. Creating this space is easier said than done because when we are in a moment, our emotions in the survival brain can take over. One of the most effective ways to increase awareness is to engage in consistent mindfulness practice. Perhaps you might already have this as part of your daily routine. However, if it's not, it can be incorporated quite simply in your professional and personal life, such as having a short breathing space at the beginning of the class or bringing your attention to your breath or footsteps when you're taking a walk. I will share more on mindfulness in another presentation. Life consists of what shows up and how you respond to them. What shows up includes things that happen outside of you, such as situations and people who show up in your life. It also includes the things that happen within you, such as your thoughts and your emotions. How you respond to them are your reactions to the things that show up. And what shows up is oftentimes outside of your control and your responsibility. For example, someone important to you passes away. However, how you respond to what shows up is fully within your control and is entirely your responsibility. You may respond to the situation by trapping yourself away in a room, burying yourself into work to not experience the loneliness that shows up, or connecting with as many people as possible. With awareness in which you pause and ask yourself, what's happening? How do I feel? What's important and what's needed? How we respond becomes our choice. This is why how we respond is within our control and is our responsibility. You might recognize this man. His name is Viktor Frankl. He is the author of the book Man's Search for Meaning, translated to 24 different languages. He was put into a concentration camp during Holocaust. During his time there, both of his parents and his wife were taken away from him and either perished or were exterminated. His profession as a psychiatrist was stripped away, and he was brought down to working on immensely hard labor during the harshest conditions. As he was surrounded by disease, starvation, brutality, and deaths of his peers on a day-to-day basis, and the things that were important to him were all taken from him, he had to create a meaning for living, to will himself to live. He realized that in the most challenging conditions, which he had no control over, he had to take hold of how he responded to them, through connecting with what's important for him and acting accordingly. When he created within him the meaning for his life, a purpose, no one could take that away from him, and in turn, he was free. He said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. The stimulus that he speaks of is what shows up, and the response is how we respond. Leadership is not required when things are smooth sailing, people are getting along and are happy. It's when people are not getting along and we are uneasy that what we do matters to create positive change. This is when leadership is necessary. As we delve into creating positive changes, especially in uncharted territories, we are likely to face uncertainty, not knowing what the future holds, clashes in opinions and conflicts because we work in a diverse community, failure of things not working out the way we hoped, distractions of things that are not as important but often easier and more comfortable taking our attention away, and lack of control. It is during these times that we will feel frustrated, disappointed, nervous, stressed, and scared. And when we do, rather than choosing a path that's easy and comfortable, leadership is a practice of focusing on and taking action on what's important and needed, even if it means to step out of our comfort zone. When we take that step out of the comfort zone, is it possible that we make mistakes? Of course. Would our feelings of discomfort sweep us off our feet and get us distracted on things that are not as important? Of course they will. But it is the process of noticing it and adjusting our path based on what's important and needed that is important. Our practice of creating positive change is a constant practice of prototyping and iterating to align our actions to what's important and needed. This is the leadership practice of creating positive change by identifying what is important and what is needed and taking purposeful action in the face of discomfort. Now, this is a nice transition point, so if you wish to take a break and stretch out, please do so. This section will focus on the leadership skill of creating positive change by using diversity as a strength. As we look around in our school community, we can say that our community is composed of diverse people of different ages, gender, personalities, skills, nationalities, religions, and languages. When we are talking about using diversity as a strength, it's not simply a celebration of this diversity on a superficial level. It's about how we can work together to enact change, even if at times the diversity can lead to disagreements and conflicts. It is when we have disagreements and conflicts that our leadership skill to use diversity as a strength will be truly tested. Let's explore here what this is about. Let's begin by watching this video. What happened? Was there a family feud and the door was broken down? Was there a big bully in school? Was the big triangle feeling lonely because they couldn't find a friend? Now, I'm going to ask you again. What happened? What happened was that there were two triangles moving and a circle moving. The lines moved as well. All the explanations before didn't actually happen. They were simply stories created by our brains. If you had a different explanation of what happened, that's a story as well. Our experiences are broadly classified into events and stories. Events are things we experience with our five senses: our sight, smell, hearing, touch, and taste. Stories are meanings we give to these events. Oftentimes, we mix up our experiences of events and stories and believe that stories are reality. But with more keen awareness, we can separate our experiences of events and stories. What does our ability to create stories do? They contribute to creating beliefs within us and in turn leading us to make judgments. What does this mean? For example, let's say that there is a person and she has over time built beliefs such as in order to be beautiful, one needs to be thin. It is important to get a high paying job, or it is important to work hard. These are beliefs that this person identifies to be truths. Now, these beliefs are foundations for the judgments that this person makes and colors the lens through which she sees reality. As she constantly looks through the lens, she's constantly judging how the reality matches with her beliefs. Depending on how reality matches or doesn't match with her beliefs, different judgments are cast on a reality. For example, if this person who believes that getting high salary is important and is a sign of success is confronted with another individual who gets low salary but spends a lot of quality time with kids, then this is a situation in which reality does not match her belief system. The judgment that is cast on this person then is that he is a loser. Now, let's say that there's another individual whose belief is that family is important and is a sign of success. If she encounters the same person with low salary and spends a lot of quality time with family, then this is a case in which her beliefs about success match reality and she would judge the person to be a winner. The key here is that the reality is the same, but depending on who's seeing the reality and what beliefs they may have, the judgment of the reality is different. This means that reality is objective, but judgments are subjective. Judgments operate like a lens, and the color of the lens we have is shaped by our beliefs and previous experiences. This can include our education, what our parents taught us, our community norms, religion, our experiences, and so on and so forth. Since no one person has identical experiences, we can say that each of us has a different colored lens through which we see the world. This is why having different interpretations of reality in a community is absolutely normal. But we forget that. When disagreements arise between two or more individuals, we judge others. And often the judgments that we cast upon others is that they are wrong and I am right. When disagreements arise, this is quite a natural response as we all have a compulsion to be right because it feels good, safe, and secure. And when we have the compulsion to be right, this also leads to a compulsion to control the situation to fit our way, which is to demand that the world should be like the way we believe to be right and shouldn't be like the way our opponent wishes it to be. So, what can we do with our tendency to judge? Well, the first thing to do is to notice that we are judging, which takes skills and mindfulness. This is like when you find yourself in an argument with your friend, for instance, and rather than judging the other person as wrong, unreasonable, and difficult, which can feed the argument even more, in that moment, you notice yourself judging the other person and notice that judgments and reality are two different things. It's like you step out of yourself and observe yourself looking through your lens. Now, this sounds easy, but it's quite difficult to do as we tend to get caught up in our thoughts and emotions in that moment. Once you recognize yourself judging, it's important to tell yourself the following. Many perspectives can be true, other perspectives are information, and we can invite diverse perspectives to get more information. There is a famous quote by Rumi, which is one of my favorite quotes, that says, "Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there." We often get into the trap of wanting to be right and labeling whoever has opposing ideas to be wrong. This feels clear and safe. However, being in the middle where you don't know who is right and who is wrong, in fact, there is no right or wrong, but multiple perspectives coexist, even the ones that don't match your beliefs. How do you think such space would feel? It would feel rather uncomfortable, right? But it's about getting used to the discomfort of being in this space and understanding that reality is where multiple perspectives coexist. That is our practice. This doesn't mean that once we practice saying the mantra, many perspectives can be true, that our judgments will cease to show up. It will. So, our practice is in noticing our judgments and breaking them down into forms that are more useful to create connections. And it's also in the practice of approaching others with the intention to understand them, so we can use diversity as a strength. For this, mindfulness practice is key, as it helps to cultivate the presence to notice our own judgments. It also helps to consciously use languages that recognize that we all create stories and different stories of reality can coexist, such as yes and instead of no but. My story about that is, or what is your story about that? For those who are interested in developing their skills even further, I highly recommend learning the practice of nonviolent communication, which all G10 students do. So, in summary, the leadership practice of creating positive change by using diversity as a strength not only includes celebrating different backgrounds, ideas, and skills, but also the ability to recognize our stories and judgments and find ways to understand and connect with others, even when there are disagreements and conflicts. Now, this is a nice transition point, so if you wish to take a break and stretch out, please do so. In this section, I want to go back to the idea that leadership is a practice. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, leadership is not about a position, title, or something we're born with, but is something we can cultivate with practice. We all get better at what we practice because of what happens in our brains. If you look at the clip on the left side, you will see the neurons extending out their antennas to each other, making connections with each other. These connections are forged when we engage in different practices and also when we receive different stimuli. The connections that the neurons make with each other are called synapses. If you look on the right, you can see the synapse density over time. Between newborn and 2 years, you can notice that the synaptic density increases immensely. This is because a newborn is receiving a whole bunch of stimuli from the environment, and each stimulus is leading to a new synaptic connection. Now, between 2 years and adulthood, what do you notice? Actually, the total number of synapses decreases, and this is because we stop engaging in certain behaviors, which means certain pathways are not used and they wean out. But you can notice that certain synaptic connections are stronger and thicker, and this is because we engage in certain practices repeatedly. And with thicker and stronger connections, we use less energy and effort to engage in the practices. You can watch this clip with David Eagleman by clicking on the link in the slide form of the presentation to understand the phenomenon of how our brain allows us to get better at what we practice. We are practicing something all of the time. Practice is about how we spend our attention, time, and energy. So if you are constantly checking your phone and are reacting to every beep and vibration that your phone makes, then you are practicing this and you're getting better at it. If you're constantly being distracted and are not paying attention to what is in front of you, then you are practicing this and you are getting better at it. If you're constantly looking around for those who are in need of help and are extending help to them, then you are practicing this and you are getting better at it. You get better at what you practice whether you're paying attention to it or not, so be careful of what you practice. Bruce Lee said, "Under duress, we do not rise to our expectations, we fall to the level of training." This means that when we are facing challenges, Even though we have every intention to respond to them applying our leadership skills, if we don't have the practice on a day-to-day basis, then we will falter for something less. This is why at UWC ISAK Japan, we intentionally build in the practice required on a day-to-day basis so that when leadership is really needed, we are equipped with the capacity to apply our leadership skills to the best of our ability. One of the foundational practices we build into our program is a practice in mindfulness. As you may have noticed in the previous sections, cultivation of awareness and presence is key in developing some of the leadership skills. We do this mainly in a leading self course, but opportunities lie to embed this practice in other classes as well. Another foundational practice we have in our program is a practice of design thinking. This is a form of problem solving that takes the steps of empathizing, synthesizing, ideating, prototyping, and iterating to create positive change. It's very aligned with building our leadership skills. It is practiced mainly in the Leading with Others course, but can also be practiced in clubs and activities, leadership projects, and even residential life. Finally, before sharing another fundamental leadership practice we have in our program, I'd like to bring our attention to the final leadership skill, as this practice explicitly ties to cultivating the skill, which is to support others in the practice of leadership. The final skill of supporting others in the practice of leadership is practiced through coaching. Coaching in a nutshell is a process of supporting those who are stuck to develop awareness for a situation they're experiencing and supporting them to take action based on what's important and needed. Coaching is practiced in advisory, clubs and activities, and in residential life. I share in more detail about the coaching process in another presentation. By watching this presentation, I hope that the spirit of the leadership practice at UWC ISAK Japan transcended through. Leadership at our school is human-centered. Our leadership practice puts the human experiences at the center and encourages each of us to become more aware of and accept our internal human experiences as well as connect with others' human experiences. Leadership at our school is growth-oriented. It's about accepting the experiences of discomfort that come with uncertainty and ambiguity and stepping out of the comfort zone to create positive change. We don't expect leadership to be a fixed model of perfection. It's rather a practice of experimentation and using failure as information to continuously grow. Leadership at our school relies on connection. We rely on each other to support each other get better at the practice of leadership, not only through coaching, but also in receiving feedback and iterating our practice so that we are creating changes within us and beyond that get at the heart of what's important and needed. If you are here, I am so grateful. I'm grateful that you stuck with me until the end. What I shared with you here are ideas of leadership, and it's only a starting point. Ultimately, in order for the ideas to come alive, my hope is that we become a community that not only encourages the practice of leadership in each other, but we also look to ourselves to figure out how we can incorporate them into our daily practices so that we can get better at leadership. I hope to support you in your growth, so if you have any questions, please feel free to approach me anytime. Thank you very much for your attention.